Man, it is November already, but before we close the books on another year, we have to squeeze in one brand spanking new receiver, the Denon X3800H, and let's see how it does against some of our recent favorites. Denon's new X3800H receiver sits pretty much in the middle of the line and is primed and ready to do battle with favorites like ONKYO's RZ50, the Yamaha A6A, and even the new MARANTZ Cinema 50. The 3800 is a 9.4 channel Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, Oro 3D, and IMAX enhanced AV receiver. It has 105 watts per channel, albeit in stereo. Obviously, power does drop as you add more channels, but similar to the Cinema 50 we just reviewed, you can expect just enough juice to drive most loudspeakers on the market today. But if you need more power, you can add a third-party amplifier like the Emotiva BassX to any of the Denon's 11 preamp outputs. Another similarity to the Cinema 50, the Denon can serve as an 11.4 channel home theater processor, which is great because at just under $1,700, the Denon is more affordable than a lot of dedicated home theater processors available today. You bass heads watching are going to be really excited to know that the Denon has 4 subwoofer outs, and yes, they are all independent of one another. There are 6 HDMI inputs and 3 HDMI monitor outs. Now, the Denon supports signals up to 8K 60 and can even scale signals up to 8K depending on your settings. Unlike previous Denon receivers, this one doesn't limit its 8K support to just one HDMI input. So those of you with next-gen consoles, no more having to choose which one to enjoy at their highest settings. Of course, you also get ARC, eARC support, as well as support for HDR formats like Dolby Vision and more. Needless to say, there isn't much the Denon can't do in 2022, but if you need a complete breakdown of the Denon's features, including its wireless and smart home options, please check out the links below. Setup is pretty straightforward, if not a little easier compared to previous models thanks to its cleaned up on-screen interface. The Cinema 50 isn't the only receiver getting a gooey glow up, and I absolutely love it. I still prefer the look of the Marantz, but let's keep it real. They are the same menus, only with some very minor color and graphical differences. And this is a great receiver for home theater newbies. The unit will basically walk you through how to get up and running. Now, more advanced users, you can skip the tutorial and dial in the Denon to taste, which you can do a multitude of ways, either via your TV and the included remote, the Denon receiver app, or from your laptop with an internet connection. The Denon has Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32 out of the box, which is going to help tailor your speakers to your room. Now, new for 2022, or more accurately 2023, is the inclusion of DIRAC. Like with the Cinema 50, you are going to have to wait until March for the expected firmware update. So despite seeing the DIRAC logo on the box, DIRAC is not operational at launch. And yes, DIRAC will come with an additional fee. In order to keep all of our comparisons as equal as possible, we tested the Denon using the same setup featured in our recent Cinema 50 review. Arundel's 1961 series of loudspeakers are great, but they are also a bit power hungry, which makes them a good torture test for an AV receiver like the Denon. We used 2 1961 towers for our left and right mains, along with its matching center, with our Klipsch in-ceiling speakers for surrounds and Atmos channels. Our SVS sub handled all of our low bass needs. We tested the Denon in both a 7.1.2 as well as a 5.1.4 configuration. I used Odyssey to dial in all of our connected speakers, which I saved to the Denon speaker preset number 1, as well as carried out a full manual setup that I saved to preset 2. The Odyssey settings resulted in a leaner, more detailed or forward sound compared to doing things the old-fashioned way with no room EQ. Not surprising, I preferred my manual settings, but that's largely because I've just never really been a fan of Odyssey's house curves. Even Odyssey's flat or more neutral curves, to me, still result in a leaner, cooler, or more articulate but less weighty and grounded sound. That said, Odyssey works, and it works well in the Denon, and it can be an absolute godsend for those of you who don't want to become overwhelmed with all of the ins and outs of calibrating a home theater by hand. That said, and for the rest of this review, I will be describing the Denon sound without Odyssey engaged. On the whole, the Denon X3800H's sound could be classified as bold, even a touch forward, dynamic, and surprisingly weighty. Coming directly off our Cinema 50 review, the Denon sounded decidedly more forward and less laid back compared to the Marantz. Even with the volume between the two units set to the same SPL through the same speakers, the Denon produced a sound that was more forward, though don't mistake it for fatiguing. In my Marantz review, I commented on the Cinema 50's smoother, rounder, dare I say warmer tone when compared to the ONKYO RZ50. We'll add the X3800H to that list, as the Denon proved to be more like the ONKYO than the costlier Marantz. Which is best is going to come down to personal taste, but if you are one who thinks the two brands are interchangeable because they're owned by the same parent company, know that they are not. The Denon seemed to coax deeper, more controlled bass from the Arundel towers than the costlier Marantz. I think that the Marantz's bass presentation was more neutral or in line with the rest of its frequency response, whereas the Denon seemed to possess a bit of boost, as if the preamp section had, say, a loudness feature engaged. Trust me, it didn't. Nevertheless, through the Denon, bass took on a greater sense of presence. Mid-range was a touch leaner, more detailed or forward through the Denon compared directly to the Marantz Cinema 50. I didn't feel as if the Denon was injecting any color to the mix, but I'll be damned if both lead singers and actors didn't seem to stand a few inches closer to the mic through the Denon, more so than just about any other receiver we've had in-house this year. The high frequencies, now this is where the Denon starts to show its more budget-friendly hand. Like with the rest of its performance, the highs are more forward. When listening to two lanes, the highs had just a bit of crunchiness and distortion as you turned things up. Compression artifacts are more on display, especially as you reach volumes over 75 to 80 dB. At volumes peaking above 90 to 95 dB, I believe the Denon is even adding a bit of its own distortion to the mix. This is more noticeable when listening to music, nevertheless it is there in one of the three ways the Denon X3800H distinguishes itself from the likes of the Marantz. I personally wouldn't lose too much sleep over this because I doubt most listeners will even notice. Regardless, I am letting you know. Jumping to soundstage and dynamics. The Denon soundstage, when listening to music, lacks the same depth and width of the Marantz and is just miles behind the ONKYO, which may be the best receiver in this class in this regard. When listening to Drifting by Two Lanes, a track that has a surround sound-like soundstage in stereo, the Denon rendered it in a more or less two-dimensional way, barely extending beyond the boundaries of the Arundel speakers themselves. In direct comparison, the Marantz opened things up more, with the ONKYO really bringing the goods, letting the sound breathe and extend well beyond the boundaries of our room. The Denon's more lateral soundstage is most observable when listening in stereo. With movies, the presence of surround and Atmos speakers pretty much puts the Denon in the same league as the Marantz and ONKYO. So if you are looking for an AV receiver that will give you as good a two-channel performance as it will a home theater one, the 3800H would not be my first choice, at least not in stereo, but when it comes to home theater or at least surround sound, it's up there with costlier options. Dynamically, the Denon is far more captivating at moderate and even lower volumes than the Cinema 50. With both receivers set to the same higher volume with peaks in the low to mid-90s, the two receivers are equally impressive. But at lower volumes, I was more drawn to the Denon than the Marantz. Between the ONKYO and the Denon, the two are about equal dynamically at low or moderate listening. As for the rest of the Denon's performance, specifically its HDMI switching and 8K 4K capabilities, switching was not the best. In fact, when auto-switching between our Apple TV 4K and our PS5, the Denon routinely switched to the wrong input, choosing the HDMI input labeled media and not game, which is the one I used for our PS5. Manually choosing game always fixed the issue. Nevertheless, there appears to be a minor bug with the Denon's auto signal sensing, one that hopefully can be fixed in firmware. Gaming on the Denon was flawless and fun. The Denon has no issues with the PS5 playing back 4K 60 and 4K 120 games with and without HDR. Games like Overwatch 2 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 worked great and without incident in their highest settings. As for comparisons, if you've skipped ahead to this point, you're going to want to go back to the beginning because you've already missed out on all of the comparisons I've made throughout the review. But to summarize, compared to the ONKYO RZ50, this is by far the most competitive head-to-head I feel the ONKYO has gotten since its release last year. While better late than never, the Denon is still second fiddle to the RZ50 in my eyes. Both have a lot of similarities sonically, but for the money, the ONKYO remains the more fleshed out and capable product right now. The Denon needs a firmware update or two, not to mention an additional investment in money from the customer to match what you can get with the RZ50 right now. So in this head-to-head, as much as I enjoyed the Denon, I would still opt for the ONKYO. Now, for the costlier Cinema 50 from Marantz, the Denon is not outright embarrassed, but it needs to be said, neither receiver is fully realized at launch. All that said, I prefer the design and sonics of the Marantz, though I will say this about the Denon. Its dated and uninspired front panel display is far more readable than the stylish porthole of the Marantz. The Marantz, in direct comparison, using the same speakers, has a mildly more laid-back presence. The Marantz has a rounder, fuller, less dynamic presentation, one that doesn't seem to favor any one aspect of the frequency band, with a more refined and less crunchy or distorted top end when pushed. Is the Cinema 50 worth an extra $1,000? I can't make that call for you, and please don't ask me to. But what I will tell you is this: I prefer the Cinema 50 hands down. While I have not tested the A6A from Yamaha, going off of my experience with the A8A and lesser V6A, something I know some of you are going to take issue with, I would choose the Denon. Yamaha makes a good receiver, for sure, but I do not like YPOW, nor do I think, given the sheer degree of customization Yamaha provides you, that the user experience that they give you is, well, on par with what they charge. While the Denon is still a firmware update or two away from greatness, its future potential outweighs what I think you're getting with Yamaha today. The Denon X3800H is another example of a receiver that just needs a little bit more time in the oven. While it can be enjoyed to a high level right now, there's just no denying that many of the reasons one might abandon their old Denon for this new one are MIA. While I maintain that when shopping for a Denon receiver, it's still best to spend more and choose something from their X line, the X3800H reviewed here is a good receiver at its price, but had Denon waited for all of the software and bugs to be worked out first, it may have been an outright great one. So that's it. That is my take on Denon's new X3800H. What did you think?
Oh my gosh. Do you know that receivers are my least favorite things to talk about?
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I hate it. It's too complicated. There's too many things to say. The reality is, half the time, there is no difference in the sound. It really comes down to user interface for me.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm going to, struggle bust through this one. Okay. Here's how I would rank them.
Okay.
Number 1, Marantz Cinema 50.
Okay.
Number 2, ONKYO RZ50.
Okay.
Number 3, Denon X3800H. Last place, Yamaha A6A.
Okay.
All right. So here's the why.
Okay.
All right. With the Marantz, to me, heads and tails, better design. I mean, it's on another planet.
Yeah.
When you look at it compared to other receivers.
Yeah.
And I also prefer its sound. Okay. The Denon, it's boring. I'm talking about the design.
Design, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So boring. I realize Marantz is really the outlier when it comes to AVRs, but put your heart into it, Denon.
Yeah.
But listen, I can see a lot of people being happy with the Denon, but it's not the one I would choose.
Okay.
ONKYO, if budget is keeping you from the Marantz,
Okay.
totally understand. It's expensive. I would go with the ONKYO.
Yeah.
Over the Denon.
Okay.
I love its sound, and there's no waiting on tech to be delivered, which to me is huge plus. So I think in 2022, it's still the value leader. Yamaha, I think it's overpriced. Like you said, it's probably way more receiver than most people.
Yeah, I mean,
really need. I would, especially if you were like brand new to home, having a home theater. It's not where I would start you.
Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the people that are very adamant in our comments about how good Yamaha is and how we give Yamaha a bad rap. I don't give Yamaha a bad rap. I know that they're good. But I have a feeling that what attracts people to Yamaha is that customization, that ability to get and just tinker until your brain explodes or melts from all of the options. And that is a very good thing, and that is something that Yamaha does. But I wouldn't say the experience of tinkering is all that enjoyable. And if you're someone that's like, hey, I got some friends coming over and I just bought a new receiver and I need to get up and running right now, Yamaha's dead last to that list. Like just dead last. I mean, you can just get up and running with a Denon, a Marantz, or an ONKYO in half the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And look, I know before you guys even ask, because I know you're going to, you cannot help yourself. You're going to ask about ARCAM. Still don't know.
Yeah.
I actually emailed them this morning in preparation to film this because, like I said, I already can sense your fingers typing away. We've been asking for years.
Yeah.
Not for like the number 4 years, but for years.
Yeah. And we've been told several times something, of course, we'll send that. And then nothing shows up.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
those are my picks.
Those are your picks.
That's how I would rank this whole AVR showdown.
Okay. All right. Well, I think there might be one more AVR before the end of the year. Not quite as new or breaking news as the Marantz and the Denon, but one that I'm looking forward to. I am looking forward to, and I think you might be too, just a little bit, because it's affordable. It's affordable.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, most of them do just about the same thing.
They do. They do.
You know, I think there's brand allegiance
for
people.
Sure.
I know it can be difficult to decide what to get, but
those are your picks.
Those are your picks. You heard it here first.
Cinema 50, RZ 50, 3800, Yamaha, and then everyone else.
ARCAM's in there somewhere. We don't know.
We don't know.
Put it wherever you want.
Yeah.
If you're going to ask about ROTEL,
it's outdated at this point.
I mean, it's
very good sounding.
It's very good sound, especially for music.
Yeah.
And I do like the silver metal, like from a.
But I mean, come on.
It's really pretty, but it's like, really expensive.
It's like what, $7 or $8 grand, or $5?
I mean, look, I don't know what it is today.
Yeah.
Because the last video we did where I speculated about the cost, which was the Focal Utopias,
16 grand.
That went up, way up. Yeah. You know, and then people are upset, like it's our doing.
Yeah,
you know?
we caused Focal to do a 25% price increase.
Yeah. Like the number of comments that we get about price increases, as if we're in on those conversations.
Yeah, trust me. We would never advocate for the price to go up, knowing our community.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, if they're not gonna listen to us, like, hey, you might want to make sure your feet are still attached,
or you might want to make sure DIRAC is installed. At launch.
Yeah. Look,
they don't listen to us, and they don't care.
Yeah. The last thing they're gonna do is like, hey, Andrew and Kristi, what would you recommend charging for this thing? Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is it. That is now our review of the Denon X3800H. What did you guys think? Let us know down in the comments below. Question of the day for you. Is this the best Denon receiver on the market right now, given all of the features and even including the fact that DIRAC is still coming soon? Let me know. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi left for you down below, including those that take you to ARCAM, know that that is a great way that you have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here. And both of us thank you very, very, very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for us today. Remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this one. And we'll see you on the next video. Bye.